All right, everyone. Welcome to the fourth edition of the Geo Hackathon, the 2024 edition. Before we jump into it, my name is Gabriel Grubach. I'm part of the organizing committee with the team that helped organize this year's hackathon. I will try to walk you a little bit and give you an introduction on what is this going to be about, so you have a little more clarity. And after that, I'll be introducing our esteemed speaker today and basically walking you through geothermal energy in Croatia and kind of looking at what happened in the past, what's going on now, and what's going to happen in the future. What you see here is an event that's happened with the support from people, support from companies, educators, and I'd like to, personally, in the name of our team, thank each and everyone that has done that for us, from the Croatian Hydrocarbons Agency to Sequent to Energeo, Baker Hughes, Geothermal Wells, OMV, iGeopen, Calida Aqua, and Soyak. Also, the organizing team that's making this happen, they come from different SPE sections across Europe. As you can see here, it's been quite a big group working together, including the geothermal technical section and the data science and engineering analytics technical section. Why is this important? It's because if you're interested in geothermal, there's a lot of it going on within SPE, and you should reach out to the nearest contacts that you have to get involved. The people that were involved in organizing this are on this screen. Each and everyone gave some time from their day, from their daily jobs to make this happen. At the end of the day, this is volunteering. It requires a lot of work, a lot of coordination. I'm happy to say that I'm part of the team with some of these people. We've managed to put some really good things together. I encourage you after this hackathon, if you're interested, to reach out, to join the organizing team and help us push forward this very, very nice initiative that has seen very good effects throughout the geothermal world and within SPE. Now, just to give you a sense of the timeline, so essentially today is bootcamp number 1. We're starting today. The registrations got extended because we have seen some very nice interest in the hackathon. So we will keep the deadline for the 28th. Until then, people can keep registering. Because these sessions are recorded, you can always go back, rewatch them, make your notes, learn, build your knowledge. There will be a team submission deadline that you will have to follow for the hackathon. If you go to our website and you go to the frequently asked questions, you can get most of your answers there. The minimum number of people, the maximum number of people in the team, etc. The hackathon starts on November 8th. And as you can tell, a couple of the boot camps will be within that week from November 8th to November 15th. And this is where you get with your teams. And if you don't have a team and you're an individual, we'll be putting you together, assembling you in a team. And this is where you get a data set and you start working on the challenge and putting everything you've learned from the boot camps and what you know from your world and coming up with a solution. The submission deadline would be December 8th, and that's where the judging committee gets together. There will be deliverables, and these will be required from each team that you will need to follow. And then the judging committee will decide who the top winners are. The final event, the closing announcement, will be on December 18th. This is where we close before the holidays and basically wrap it all up. What you see here is a plan of the boot camps. What we have tried to do is build a workflow, trying to understand, based on the data set that we got from Croatia, is how do we build something that helps you understand what's going on in Croatia in the past, now, and in the future in terms of geothermal, which we will learn today, and then trying to get on session number 2, which is after tomorrow. You will get an introduction to what the challenge is, go through the details, the data review, the handling, and our colleagues Josh Sellers and Mike Gunningham and Boris Vidoš will walk you through it. And then we want to understand what the geology basics is in geothermal reservoirs. How do we look at them? Is it really the same way as we look at oil and gas? And obviously it's not. What are the similarities and differences? So we'll have Anna Maria Alexandru from OMV. And then once we've understood that, how do we understand the rocks? Essentially, what kind of logs do we run? What kind of information can we gather from these rocks and understand what the geothermal reservoir could look like? And that will be Mr. Tom Bradley, who's coming from Baker Hughes. Now, you will know that during the hackathon, you will be using Python for a certain type of the work that you will do, and then a commercial software, but essentially we'll have Chiara Galimberti, an additional speaker from E&I, to walk you a little bit through machine learning and deep learning and some of the algorithms that are being used out there. Josh will then walk us through the leapfrog, building a conceptual model, and I'll walk you through it briefly. And then one of the very important things is how do you quantify heat? You know, in the past, you're looking at oil and gas and quantifying oil in place and gas in place, but what is the heat in place, quotes, quotes. And so how do we quantify that? So part of the reservoir engineering workflow. And now that you've had all this, is how do you create a development plan for a geothermal field? And Mr. Tim Lyons will walk in and give us some insights. And then we'll top it off and close the bootcamp sessions with the project economics. Yes, you have the heat. Yes, you have a plan, but is it going to make money or not? And what is the reason for that? So this was the mindset behind the bootcamps. I highly suggest you to be there live to be able to interact with the speakers and ask your questions. Now, when it comes to the challenge, you've seen it. The data set comes from Croatia. Essentially, we have data from several wells, and we need to get together. You need to get together and come up with a plan on how to generate electricity for a town of 50,000 people. How are you going to do that? It will be split in two parts. I'm not going to go through it in detail right now because our session number 2 in 2 days will exactly walk you through all of this and give you all the details. And then essentially, you know, you have the reasoning of why we're doing all this, right? We've looked in the past, our hackathons were mostly focused on the northern part of Europe. We've now moved to the southeastern part of Europe. And so we're looking at that right now. What you see in this picture is a very beautiful place in Croatia. And I can see Dragutin smiling. Yeah, that's not where the geothermal wells will be, but if you ever get a chance to go to Croatia, you definitely should. It's a beautiful country with a lot of geothermal potential, and I think it's very exciting that we have this data set this year. I mentioned earlier that there's going to be a contribution from Sequent with Leapfrog. It's a commercial software. It's very well known in the industry. And so what we thought is to give the participants an opportunity to use an open source, which is Python, but also be able to use a commercial software and basically give you a taste of what that world out there when you get a job would look like. Or if you're working, maybe see this as an opportunity to look into different kind of software that will help you, you know, create basically a conceptual model. As you can see on the screen here, you're going to QA/QC some of the derived properties. You're going to visually understand what is the placement of the reservoirs, where are the wells, what makes sense and what doesn't, and then at the end, you know, come up with a solution. It will be very important to read the note at the bottom here, which you will be informed about during session number 2 in terms of usage of this software and the teams that will be using it, but more on that on session number 2. As I mentioned initially, the registrations are extended, so if you have friends, colleagues that are interested in geothermal, this is the opportunity. So let them know, let them register. There's still time to do it. And now, without further ado, what I'd like to do is introduce our speaker today, Mr. Dragutin Domitrovic, who's been our supporter for a while now. At the moment we asked him to step in and help us, there was an immediate yes. It's always great to have you here. He's graduated petroleum engineering at the University of Zagreb in 1993, worked in the petroleum industry for more than 23 years, and then in 2016 decided to go renewable by joining a project of construction and operation of the first geothermal power plant in Croatia. So there's no one better than him to be here today. Since 2020, he was a geothermal consultant, and as of 2023, went back to operations as a manager in GEODE and holder of 3 exploration licenses in Croatia. I would now like to pass it on to Dragutin. There will be a Q&A at the end of this session, and enjoy.
Good. So replace current share, just 1 second. Here I am. Good?
Yeah, just put it in full mode. Perfect. It works.
Okay, good. Hello, everyone. Let's immediately go into this. So as mentioned by Gabriel, thank you very much for your kind introduction. I'm currently an operations manager, director of one of the directors of GEODE. And my consulting company, Calida Aqua, is still alive. I do a little bit of work on the side, which is not, you know, in conflict of interest with the main work I do now in GEODE. So shortly about me, already mentioned, graduated petroleum engineering from University of Zagreb, worked in various engineering and managerial positions. I was even for the last almost 3.5 years in INA Group. I was president of the board of the local petroleum services company, Croatia. So I even covered this in my resume. and then switched to the green side by going into geothermal. So also, last but not least, as of many years ago, okay, from 1990, I was a proud member of SPE, and I was one of the founding members, actually, of the SPE student chapter at the University of Zagreb. So very proud of that. Let's move immediately into the matters. Croatia, as you can see here, continental part of Croatia, is located in the Pannonian Basin. And being in danger of gross oversimplification, I will say that within Pannonian Basin, high geothermal gradient is not due to any, let's say, fault lines bringing heat from deep down. We simply have a thin crust, thinner than elsewhere. Around Hungary, it can go even down to 24, 23 kilometers. And in Croatian, let's say, part of the Pannonian, we are about 35, 36 kilometers. When you go elsewhere, it's much thicker. And then when you take a look at the thin crust, simply the difference between the surface and the mantle temperature is spread in over a little shorter, let's say, thickness of the crust, and therefore the temperature rises much faster than elsewhere. Croatia has a geothermal gradient. So looking specifically at Croatian part, Croatian has a geothermal gradient 60% higher than on the average elsewhere in the world. Okay, so speaking about the past of utilization of geothermal brine, geothermal heat, this is a place roughly, the photograph is from northern Croatia, where in 1st century Anno Domini, there was already a small spa done by Roman actually soldiers who had a retreat to when they were wounded or got sick in the battles. They would go back to a place like this and recuperate there. And these are the remnants of this particular spa from many, many years ago. They were already recognizing the value of geothermal heat. Okay. Now, mentioned geothermal gradient in the continental, in the, let's say, central part of Croatia, it's quite high. And unfortunately not along the Croatian coastline. What Gabriel showed you is city of Dubrovnik, which is located around here. Very beautiful place, but the geothermal gradient, as you can see, is negligible. So no geothermal business there, unfortunately. Otherwise, we would all go there and do geothermal. So the, just one second. So roughly, instead of talking about degrees Celsius per meter of depth, I usually like to say that on the average, in the continental part of Croatia, at the depth of 2,000 meters, you will have a temperature of 100 degrees Celsius, 3,000 meters, 150, 4,000 meters, 200, etc. That's on the average. Of course, there are variations aerially in this area, but this is what we encountered. I worked for 20 plus years in oil industry in Croatia. And when someone asks me, okay, guys, how much do you know about geothermal? Well, my answer to this is actually we did geothermal all the time, even producing oil and gas, because the temperatures in our oil and gas reservoirs would be the same, regardless of the fact that we were not producing it for geothermal reasons. So the Croatian Hydrocarbon Agency, which was already mentioned by Gabriel as one of the supporting organizations of this geohackathon, they took into account the data from more than 3,500 wells drilled over decades in this particular part of Croatia, and 2D and 3D seismic, which spans thousands of kilometers and over 20,000 square kilometers of 2D. All of this was the source of information for estimation of the capacity of electricity generation. So we're not talking about direct heat usage for either district heating or industrial purposes or agriculture. Specifically speaking about electricity generation, there is conservatively, I have to say, estimated capacity is now at 1,000 megawatts of electrical power. So quite a sizable capacity, which we are all hoping will be transferred over the years into projects. So far, as I will mention later, we have only one geothermal power plant in Croatia. To compare the geothermal gradient of Croatia to wind and solar, first I show you the wind. And as you can see, the capacity of, this is watts per square meter. I'm not an expert on this, but just a good illustration. Capacity of the wind farms and production of electricity by utilizing the wind force is much stronger in Adriatic, along the Adriatic coast of Croatia, and much less in continental part of Croatia. So this is sort of vice versa from geothermal gradient. When you take a look at the solar, the same situation. Insulation along the coastline, of course, is much stronger than in the continental part of Croatia on the average, due to clouds, fogs, etc., etc. Dalmatian coastline is much stronger there. And then you see that actually the geothermal power is the winning, let's say, ticket of the continental part of Croatia when we talk about significant production of renewable electricity from these sources. Also, a nice thing about continental part of Croatia, where geothermal is located, is that the high voltage grid is quite well developed. We're talking about 400 kilovolts, 220 kilovolts, the red lines, and the dark lines are 110 kilovolts. There is a little bit of a shortage in these areas, but a nice thing about this is that due to lack of wind and solar, at this particular moment, the high voltage grid in this part of Croatia is not over-congested. It's not oversaturated by solar and wind farms, which is actually the case along the coastline. And as we are planning the further development of our renewable resources in Croatia, there is a problem with the shortage of capacity for connection along the Croatian coastline for new solar and wind farms. In continental part of Croatia, we did not encounter this kind of a problem so far. So whenever we talk to the grid operator which operates the high voltage grid in Croatia, they say, you don't have to worry about connecting your geothermal power plants to our grid. And of course, I don't know what the grid rules are. Usually they're quite similar around Europe and even around the world. Sort of a limit for the switching between the distribution network, medium voltage, and going for sure into the high voltage grids of 110 kV and more is about 10 megawatts. So in Croatia, if you have a power plant which would be smaller in capacity than 10 megawatt, you would go into a distribution grid, actually, not a high voltage grid, because it's cheaper, the cost of setting it up is lower. But of course, we are all happy to have sweet worries of high capacity of geothermal power plants. I wanted to mention this. This is maybe not the most recent piece of information. I got this from the website of United States Department of Energy some years ago to just compare the size, the area that you have to occupy with a certain technology of producing electricity. So you can see that coal, most likely including the open coal mines, takes really huge swaths of land for the same quantum of energy produced, gigawatt hours, I'm guessing, per year. So this also avoids talking about gigawatt hours, not gigawatts installed, changes the story between solar, wind, and geothermal, as I will show later, because the capacity factor, load factor of geothermal power plants over 1 year of production is 90 to 95%, while wind is about 30, 35%, and solar can be between 15 and 20% of the time that it operates, because there is no sun over the night. There's less sun during the winter time, etc., etc. Wind doesn't blow all the time in most of the locations. And geothermal, when you put it to work, yes, it can work 24/7 essentially. So even in countries where there's let's say a large number of people living, or there is a lack of space because you utilize the land for different things like agriculture or something else, it's not without merit to think about also the area that your particular renewable power plants will take when you build them. Now we come to another view of geothermal potential of Croatia. This is an online map, online interactive map. You can look it up on the Croatian Hydrocarbon Agency website. It contains, so it shows you, first off, the geothermal gradient somehow, now in colors, of course. And then it depicts various exploitation fields, exploration areas in green. This is these spaces in, that's what, some dark red are actually the, they call it preliminary exploration. These are in the domain of Croatian Hydrocarbon Agency, and there is one hybrid license. So there is currently in the various states of operation or administrative preparation procedures, there are 25 exploration areas, as I said, shown in green, 7 preliminary exploration, I will explain this later, in the domain of agency, of hydrocarbon agency, 9 production areas, so they're not necessarily in production, but they are preparing the paperwork and the permitting to go into production down the line, or they are. And one hybrid is Dragutin. Here we will see it on the next map, which is a combination of geothermal and natural gas, which is present in the geothermal reservoirs, which will be utilized as well. So you can see that from borderline with Slovenia in the west and Serbia in the east, between Hungary in the north and Bosnia in the south, there is quite a large capacity. Also, each of these dots shown in this particular map, each of these dots represents a well which was drilled. There are even some data available. They're being upgraded all the time, and each such well confirmed geothermal capacity for a certain package of the reservoirs. When we take a look at the utilization of these, out of these 25 exploration, 10 of the exploration areas are dedicated to future electricity production. Preliminary exploration areas are operated or let's say in the domain of Croatian Hydrocarbon Agency. These 6, Zaprešić, Velika Gorica, Sisak, this is Vukovar, Vinkovci, and Osijek, they are dedicated to actually de-risking of the direct heat usage projects, future district heating projects or utilization of geothermal heat in a different manner. So what agency was doing, they did geological analysis, they even shot seismic, and then they analyzed everything and will be drilling some exploration wells to turn these areas down the line into exploitation fields, which would be then offered to someone to develop it for direct heat usage. So these are not for electricity. There is one preliminary exploration area here, which is called Bootcamp, which has a double role the primary role is as a location for future carbon storage, because in the vicinity of this particular area, there is a cement factory in Našice over here, which will then install in time, but I'm guessing quite soon, because the times of endless emission, let's say, allowances will pass, they will have to install carbon capture unit in their cement production facility, and then it will be brought to this particular area and injected into a carbonate reservoir. The double roll, which I mentioned there, is also because this particular reservoir is at the temperature of 150 degrees plus. I'm talking about degrees Celsius, 150 degrees plus, which also gives it quite a sizable potential for electricity production down the line. But let's say this is a secondary element in this particular area. Out of 9 production areas, 4 are currently dedicated to electricity production. So one of those, I'm guessing you will get the data from, is Slatina 2. For the hackathon, there is Lunjkovec-Kutnjak over here. The Velika Ciglina, the first geothermal power plant here in Croatia, is located here. And there is, okay, and there is this hybrid one, which is also for electricity. Plus the area in Karlovac is sort of, it's now in exploration yet, but it has the capacity also of both electricity generation and heat for delivering into the city. So northwestern part of Croatia, zooming in to get more details. I will not explain the details about each particular area because it would take us for much too long, but we'll point out a couple of interesting areas. For example, the Velika Ciglina is located here, so exploitation field where the first and so far the only geothermal power plant is located. And there is a widespread of these exploration areas, exploitation fields, etc., which go from very small ones, like Sveta Nedelja over here. We would have to zoom it. You can go later on to this interactive map and take a look at details. Very small one, which is feeding the heat, geothermal heat, to a local production of tomatoes in a greenhouse. So very small area, one well, no big deal. Then there is Ciglina, which is very hot, and we have the power plant with net capacity of 10 megawatt. There are Lunjkovec-Kutnjak, Legrad. All of these are going very soon. Lunjkovec-Kutnjak is already an exploitation field. Legrad 1 will be going there soon, which have capacity of between 10, 15, up to all the way to 100 plus megawatt of electricity generation. There are many like Virovitica 2 here, Korenovo, Bjelovar, Križevci. These are all exploration areas in the future, exploitation fields, which are dedicated simply to utilization of the heat. And the local communities, cities and local municipalities are actually, they asked for the rights to explore geothermal to their communal companies, local companies which do electricity, or they take care of the, let's say, garbage collection or something like this. And they took over these roles so that they would be the holders of the rights in their local areas, with the aim of down the line in the future producing heat for the local purposes. One interesting thing to also mention is this is the city of Zagreb, where I'm sitting right now, capital of Croatia, and there is quite a sizable geothermal field in around Zagreb area, which has been in production since 1980s. Originally, it started producing to supply the heat to the local sports center, heating spas and halls, sports halls, etc. For many years, it was just doing this from one well, production, re-injection into the second well. Then a couple of years ago, the holders of the license sort of expanded the utilization of the heat to cover also the kinesiologic college of the University of Zagreb. And this autumn, a couple of weeks ago, I'm guessing, I didn't follow the news, they were supposed to connect also the dorms in this particular area of city of Zagreb. Capacity of this geothermal field is such that half of the city of Zagreb could be heated instead of using fossil fuels, could be heated from this particular geothermal field. And we all hope that, you know, down the line, this is something that will start to be developed. Okay. I don't know how this works, Gabriel. Maybe you can help. If anyone has a question already, maybe you can stop me.
Yeah, there was a question, Dragutin, from
Yes.
Diana, Dr. Diana. She said that why there is a red zone with wells but without an area? What type of characteristic have made these zones as to not be selected as a potential geothermal area?
Where is that?
I think it's the one where you have dots in the red areas, but there's not really a box around them that's delineating them.
So first we have to clarify. Very nice, good question. Thank you very much. It's important to understand that apart from several wells recently, in the, let's say, last X years, maybe 10 years, all of these wells from 1950s on were drilled to look for oil and gas. So in those days, geothermal heat was not considered of anything valuable. So these wells, all of these wells, almost all, let's say, were drilled looking for oil and gas. And in the old school vocabulary of oilmen, it would be called a dry hole if you didn't find hydrocarbons there. So you would go to drill a well, test it, no hydrocarbons, goodbye. It would be maybe even plugged, abandoned, etc., because it was not considered to be valuable for anything else. So you have there are many wells. These were all exploration wells, which are sort of, you know, located around Croatia. But for the time being, these were not defined as not yet as the future exploration fields, because Croatian Hydrocarbon Agency sort of cherry-picked the best ones with higher quality information, and chose these ones to be the first to be offered in tenders for exploration. Bit by bit, we will go into, of course, more exploration areas, more exploitation fields down the line, etc., etc. So it would be too fast to offer everything at the same time. It would be a mess, and therefore they are sort of dosing it. You know, after they complete one set of areas, then there are investors who take it over, start working on it. Then they define additional ones, etc., etc. I hope I've answered the question. There are some.
Hey, Dragutin, we have some questions coming in, but if it's okay with you, we can address those at the end of your talk, and I'll keep track of all of them.
It's also possible. Yeah, we can do it like this. Okay, let's move on. Good. Okay, so this is Southwest. To continue the story, again, Zagreb, Karlovac, Topusko is, for example, a very small one. It's a spa which has existed from, I don't know, for the last 200 plus years. And they have been producing hot water anyway, but due to administrative reasons, decided to define it as something which goes according to the Act on Exploration and Exploitation of Hydrocarbons. You will see it later in a separate slide. This is the basic law we have right now for exploration and exploitation of geothermal energy in Croatia. So don't be misled by the fact that it's called hydrocarbons, because it also contains chapters on geothermal, also on carbon storage, and underground gas storage for energy storage, right? And Topusko has been producing according to the Act on Waters, but then they realized that it's too costly for them. The regulations according to for water production according to the Act on Waters make it far costlier than going through hydrocarbon law. And they decided, okay, let's switch the administrative package to a different story. Okay, and this is the eastern part of Croatia. Also, there are some areas which are quite sizable, like Tekic, but there again, this is a area which will be defined or dedicated purely to extraction of the heat for direct usage, regardless of the fact that it's quite sizable. There is also worth saying Bošnjaci Sjever, very small one. You can't even see it here. It's a couple of less than a square kilometer. One well also providing the heat for the greenhouse production of tomatoes. Worth saying, and I will repeat it in a subsequent slide, this was the first privately invested dedicated geothermal well drilled in Croatia. So not looking for oil and gas, but specifically going for geothermal brine. Also, while it's still on the screen, I will mention it. Pčelić, Sječe, and then Nestinovo are areas, the licenses which the company I work for, IGEOPEN right now, have and operate, and I will be saying a little bit more about those down the line. Okay, this map that I showed you has also additional details available. So if you click on a exploration area or exploitation field, you will get essential information about it. What it is, who is license holder, when the permit started, when the permit will end, what is the block area. And you can scroll down. Of course, I can't do it because it's now an image embedded here. But there might be some additional information also where the coordinates of the area are, etc. Also, if you click on a well like this, like one of these dots, you will get borehole coordinates, name of the well, status of the well, when it was drilled, maybe even some logs available from this particular well. So it's quite an interesting map to play around with and to click around and to learn about what's available in Croatia. So general lithostratigraphy of Croatian continental part, where speaking from the perspective of utilization and extraction of geothermal heat. I'm not a geologist, so in advance, I apologize if I mess up something. But there are 4 major plays. I just realized it's in Croatian. Anyway, so it's post-rift clastic play in upper Miocene here. Usually sandstones with reasonably lower depths and temperatures around 60, 70, 100 degrees maybe. You can utilize this for direct heat usage only. So there is no, it's not a possibility to get these sandstones to produce enough geothermal brine at higher temperatures to support a geothermal power plant. Then there is in the, let's say, older and middle Miocene, synriftic carbonate and clastic play, combination of breccias and the limestones, already slightly higher temperatures and hopefully higher flow rates expected from these reservoirs. So you might already consider it for, let's say, borderline electricity production. Then the main, I would say, somehow geothermal play for the electricity production, pre-rift carbon play from Mesozoic. There can be really thick packages of carbonates, predominantly dolomitic limestones and dolomitic breccias. Naturally fractured, all of them, breccias also, of course, being what they are. So you can expect, if you target into the fault zones where the crushing and the fracturing of the rock happened, you can expect to get some sizable flow rates from such production wells. To illustrate, in Ciglina, project that I was managing and starting and kicking off, let's say, we on each well, each single well, we were able to produce, even at the very beginning, above 500 tons of brine per day. not when they were working together because they were then interacting, but even above 500 tons per day. So this is, if you have temperatures of 170, 175, maybe even 190, 200 degrees from these reservoirs, this is already quite a sizable quantity of the heat. And then finally, there is a pre-rift magmatic metamorphic play, quite deep, high temperatures, but there can be some issue. You really need to find naturally fractured parts of such reservoirs for them to be useful. And we have a situation in one of our licenses in Ernestinovo. We actually are targeting these magmatic and metamorphic rocks at the depth of 3,800 meters, which have a temperature of 165, 170 degrees Celsius in the reservoir. So this is roughly the geology that you can encounter in Croatia. And it's also worth mentioning, this is something that when I talk to people who do geothermal elsewhere in the world, there is a tendency to forget that Croatia is a petroleum zone, petroleum generating and gas generating zone. So in the gas phase, and even in geothermal reservoirs, you can find traces of oil, pardon me, and there can be quite significant amounts of hydrocarbons present in the gaseous phase, which is liberating when you produce geothermal brine. So the methane can go from several ppms up to 45% of the gaseous phase. So this is not something to neglect, and we will have to take care of these gases. So there is, when you talk about potential venting, which we of course don't want to do because it will not then be green energy production. If you talk about venting of, let's say, even tiny quantities, you're talking about venting methane. And this is something that will most likely not pass. Okay, so a little bit of a recent history, not Roman times, but more recent. This is a photograph of I think it's a workover rig from 1950s. Quite, let's say, you can see oil production, but as a memory of old days. In 19s, I will, of course, this timeline will not depict everything that happened related to geothermal, but I will mention quite some more important points in the history. In 1967, Bizovac 1 was drilled well in northeastern Croatia with quite sizable temperature of 96 degrees Celsius, which at the time, it didn't have any significant quantities of hydrocarbons, but even at that time, it was noticed that this temperature is high, that the brine could be utilized, and the well was not abandoned. It was just put aside for future development of utilization of geothermal heat. So this is the first recorded, let's say, event in the history of INA, because this was all done by, I did not mention maybe, by Croatian national oil company INA, which is not 100% national anymore. It's co-owned with the Hungarian MOL Group, but at the time it was a 100% state-owned company, and they were doing all the exploration and production. In 1969, 2 years later, you see Kutnjak 1 was drilled, 145 degrees Celsius, even more, better temperature. Now, at the time, of course, also, they said, okay, so now we're talking maybe about some significant amounts of energy. We'll see what to do about it later. It will not be abandoned. And now I can say that even this particular well from 1969 is considered to be a production well in future Lunjkovec-Kutnjak license, which is aiming to produce up to 15, maybe even more megawatt of electricity. 1976, very close to Kutnjak, Lunjkovec 1, the same reservoir, but shallower on the structure, and the temperature was lower because of this, 128 degrees Celsius. And now this particular pair of wells, Kutnjak 1 and Lunjkovec 1, being in the same reservoir and proven to be connected hydraulically, will be a production injection minimum per a doublet for production and injection, and potentially additional wells will be drilled to boost the capacity of the area, of the exploitation field. Year later, 1977, in Stupnik, very close to Zagreb, outskirts of the city of Zagreb, a well was drilled with 75 to 82 degrees Celsius over the quite a thick column of limestones encountered in the wellbore, which actually found this large geothermal field Zagreb, which I mentioned earlier. Also, nothing done immediately, but you will see later on the timeline, things happened. 1986, some 9 years later, Nedelja 1, also on the western outskirts of Zagreb, 65 degrees Celsius in quite a shallow reservoir, sandstone. Then in 1988, Ivanić is one of the largest oil fields in central Croatia, 40 kilometers east of Zagreb, but they found a reservoir with no hydrocarbon saturation, with quite nice temperature of 60 degrees Celsius, which was then put into utilization for heating a local hospital, specialized hospital for skin disease. Then in 1990, Velika Ciglina 1, 170 degrees Celsius in the wellbore. This was the starting well for the future utilization in the geothermal power, in the first geothermal power plant, Velika 1. 1996, you see, from 1967 all the way to 1996, exploitation field Bizovac was established. It's not that there was no production of geothermal brine from Bizovac wells, but it was the first dedicated geothermal exploitation field. 1997, start of minor geothermal production in Zagreb area, as I mentioned. This is, and then first feed-in tariff model. This was sometimes, if you are into engineering and geology and stuff, you can tend to forget that the administrative environment where you work is also terribly important for development of certain businesses. So geothermal electricity, geothermal energy is expensive to get to, and if you don't, if the country where the resources are is not ready to, at least at the very beginning, push people to do something and stimulate them, there might be no development at all. So in 2006, we had a first feed-in tariff model, which then laid groundstone for the further development of all renewable resources in the Republic of Croatia, including geothermal. In 2007, Nedelja 1, the one mentioned here, started producing for real. 2010, as I mentioned, Bošnjaci 1, this small area where this was the first dedicated geothermal well paid for by the private business in 2010. 73 degrees Celsius, it supports or supplies 98-99% of the heat needed by this particular greenhouse of several hectares growing tomatoes there. And in 2015, finally, the development of Velika Ciglina exploitation started. I was then head of the CROSCO, of the service company. We did workovers of 2 producers, Velika Ciglina 1 and 1A, and 2 injection wells, Velika Ciglina 2 and Patkovac 1. And these were not just worked over, they were also additionally drilled to get thicker or to get deeper into the geothermal reservoir, into these dolomitic limestones and dolomitic breccias, which are present there, to have higher capacity for injection. This was all done by company I was heading then. And then I moved to actually to the other side. And after construction of the power plant, we started it up in 2019. And the commercial production started in March 2009. So this is the, let's say, more recent geothermal timeline. And you can see that from some very shy beginnings and thinking about what to do. Situation, I have to also say, you know, sometimes people ask me, how come that in Croatia there was no faster? You knew that you had these resources. You knew that you had high temperature. How come that you didn't develop these resources much faster? And the answer is that during the socialist times, because Croatia was part of Yugoslavia then, and even nowadays we have somewhat regulated energy price. In these days, the energy was so cheap that coming with the idea to utilize geothermal in a more, let's say, more intensive way, it would be, considered no. Why? Why would you do this? And plus, at that time, many years ago, we didn't think very much about the climate change and about effects that human race is having on the climate of the Earth. Okay, so the energy authorities that we have to work here in Croatia, or that maybe I should say we have pleasure of working with, is the Ministry of Economy. These are long sausages of titles. Directorate for Energy had these two sectors. One of them is for petroleum engineering and geothermal waters. They take care of the subsurface, of wells, of construction of petroleum-related, geothermal-related facilities, and energy markets infrastructure. These guys take care of the electricity part of geothermal power plants. Also, Croatian Hydrocarbon Agency. In Croatian, it's Agencija za ugljikovodike, so this is the abbreviation in Croatian. They were dealing with this from a very beginning. They were founded in 2018 to take care of the hydrocarbons mostly, but now the ever larger part of their activities is geothermal. And since January 2022, they have a dedicated geothermal energy sector. Croatian Energy Regulatory Agency also sets up the regulatory environment for energy in all its forms. And there is Croatian Energy Market Operator HROTE, which is the company or operator which is in charge of signing the premium price contracts with developers of renewable energy power plants. So wind, solar, but also geothermal. And they're operating the funds which are filled by surcharges on every kilowatt hour that is consumed in Croatia. I have to stop for just a moment and turn on the light because the sun went down. Or no, my colleague will do this. Thank you so much. Okay, good. So this is the legal framework. I mean, an excerpt, of course. We have many more laws and regulations and stuff like this, but these are the most important ones. I already mentioned Act on Exploration and Exploitation of Hydrocarbons, which also covers geothermal, underground gas storage, and carbon sequestration. So this again talks about subsurface, about wells, about facilities, reinjection pipelines, production pipelines, everything that's not power plant itself, Act on Renewable Energy Resources and Highly Efficient Cogeneration, again, a sausage of a title, defines everything related to renewable resources and renewable power plants and how they fit into the system. Electricity market defines also how you get energy approvals, how you get connections to the grid, etc., etc. And then is, of course, these acts or laws which talk about natural protection, physical planning, construction. So Act on Construction will define how you build your power plant, apart from the wells, pumps, reinjection pipelines, production pipelines, etc. Okay. So now we would like to introduce, or some of us, geothermal players in the market in Croatia. We are somehow pushing our authorities to go for Act on Geothermal Energy, to replace some of these laws, some of these acts, because unfortunately, geothermal is a little bit different from everything. So we are in the Act on Exploration of Hydrocarbons, but we are different from hydrocarbons. We are in renewable, but we're different from all the renewables because of the complexity of procedures of geothermal. Electricity, different, wherever you touch, we are different from everything, and there are necessary modifications and, let's say, exemptions from general rules to modify for geothermal. So we are pushing right now to go with a comprehensive and well-defined Act on Geothermal Energy, which would then help us define our projects. So, permitting is not very easy, but then I guess I hear that it's never easy. In majority of the countries, there are some, let's say, hurdles and problems to be overcome. In case of Croatia, so you need to, all of this that it's listed here, all these bullets are actually parts of a definition of the procedure, which is defined in the Act on Hydrocarbons. You need to do exploration, you need to approve your reserves, approve your field development plan, establish exploitation field property rights, blah, blah, blah. And then you go into the geothermal, for geothermal power plants, you go for the production agreement with the state, and this gives you the right to apply for the so-called energy approval. And this is then it opens the possibility for you to participate in a premium price tender managed by GEODE, which I mentioned on previous slides. Then so you get the energy approval, you hopefully win the tender, you get the premium price contract, and then you have to move fast to get into the production of your power plant. So you have to drill additional wells in the parallel, you construct your power plant, and then get the usage permit at the very end, so you can happily start your commercial production of electricity. Unfortunately, also we are fighting a little bit with this because the period given, the deadline given for your commercial startup of your power plant is only 4 years from the moment that you win the tender for premium price. And we consider that this is too short for geothermal power plants, especially if you're talking about the larger ones, where you need to drill 7, 8, 10, 12 wells, construct maybe in the power plant, which consists of several modules, etc. So we are now sort of, also vying for this to be extended to a more reasonable time frame. I will now gripe a little bit, speaking from the perspective of an investor. So in Croatia, it's also, this is the color-coded parts are counties. So for example, this is Međimurska County, Varaždinska County. This is city of Zagreb, Zagrebačka County around it. This is Osječko-baranjska County, etc. And each of these is divided into smaller parts, which are municipalities. And the issue with this is that if your power plant capacity is less than 10 megawatt electrical, net capacity, or delivered into the grid, then your physical planning level is municipality. So you don't have to bother with county spatial physical plans. If it's 10 to 20, it's county. If it's above 20, it's state. But this state in Croatia is being reverted back to the counties because the state physical plan has been in development for years and it didn't move much. It complicates, I don't know, in your own, let's say, legislation where you live and you work, whether physical planning is a big deal. In Croatia, it is. If your power plant, your exploitation field is not in the physical plan, then you cannot get location permits for either your wells or for your power plant and construct it down the line. So, and the processes of changing the physical plans in Croatia can be lengthy. So it's also a pain in the neck, to be polite. So this is something that has to be taken care of very much in advance when you start the project. Also, there is a issue of happy issue of property rights. This is again, this map is taken from the online map of land parcels and in Croatia. So each of these numbers, each of these little whatever they are shapes is particular parcel of land. You can click on it in this online system and find out who owns it. Are there any limitations to usage, etc., etc.? So this is the power plant in Ciglina, Velika Ciglina 1. And you can see how tiny, small some of these parcels are. And in each of these, you will have to sort out property rights with their owner, co-owners. There are, on some of those small parcels, you might have up to 16 co-owners. This is unfortunately a product of, let's say, agricultural character of Croatia over many centuries, I would say, when families would have many children and the property would be divided into smaller and smaller pieces so that each child inherits a part of their land. So now it's there are now tendencies to so put these together into more reasonable pieces of land on a state level. But coming as a private investor, you need to take care of all of this wherever you plan to build your power plant or drill wells or put pipelines anywhere. So you have to sort out the property rights there. And it can be sometimes challenging. I will not go into details unless you would like to learn more, then we can talk about it. So now also, particularly in Croatia, there are design issues. So you come in, you waltz in with, we've had a situation where an Italian company that's built or provided the technology for ORC, organic rankine cycle technology in Ciglana, they provided us with, huge pile of designs, and they said, okay, there you go. To which we had to engage a local design company because it's very strict in Croatia. Language has to be Croatian. Format of designs is very strictly defined. It has to, conform to local rules. Croatia-specific requirements also on the specifics and details of these designs. So it doesn't work like this. If you will be coming to Croatia someday and will be starting to design and plan for construction of the power plant, you need to have a local design company with local authority working together with a ORC producer, not the other way around. Also, due to especially if we talk about deeper reservoirs, hotter reservoirs with possibility, with capacity to produce enough geothermal heat for geothermal power plants, for electricity production, there will also be significant quantities of salts dissolved, and this will require corrosion protection. Also, there will be H2S, there will be CO2. So it's fun, let's say, to take care of all of these corrosion elements. Also, scaling inhibition is necessary. This is one of the pipes from Ciglana when they were doing some testing of the wells without any inhibition. I will admit this is not, this is very low. It was on atmospheric pressure, but these, what is it, 10 centimeters of scale happened over maybe 2 days or maybe even less of discharging of the brine into the testing pit without inhibition. So you understand that scaling inhibition is very, very, very important in certain areas and certain reservoirs. Also, we have quite wildly high standards for explosion proofing. I've had a situation from my oil and gas days that a Norwegian guy was helping us doing some designs and something, and he had the pleasure of interacting with the organization, which was at the time called X-Agency. Now it's part of the Ministry of Interior. And this Norwegian guy said to me, okay, I know that our Norwegian authorities are crazy and they really go into details, but your guys here are, on another level. So this is something that you really have to take care of. And noise emission, which is depicted by here, is something that is very conservative. So in a certain area where you plan to build your power plant, you are allowed at the edge of the inhabited area, wherever the houses are, let's say 700 meters, 900 meters away, you are allowed to increase the night and day level of noise on the average by 1 decibel only. So that's quite, let's say, demanding. And you have to take care of all of these details when designing your power plant. So this is the site of Ciglana power plant while it was being constructed. This is the interface to the grid, to the medium voltage grid, the switch yard of HEP ODS. And these are, of course, the bundles for the liquefying, for cooling the expanded isobutane in case of Ciglana. Testing pit, which was then later on put into plastic. This is the muffler still lying down. It was then put up on this basement here. We still lack here a bunch of pumps and high pressure separator. These are tanks for the isobutane, which were then put here, electrical building here. So it looks like a mess then, but we've had at some certain moments, I think more than 25 companies, 26 companies working at the same time. And it can be done. We are proud that in this particular project, 68% of all of the capex was actually paid to local Croatian companies. And there is also possibility locally, regionally, globally, if you want, but then it's a matter of is it worth lugging certain elements over half the world for manufacturing things and for construction opportunities for the local companies to create jobs essentially. Now, exploration license is issued. I'm switching now to this again. So, Croatian Hydrocarbon Agency is the organization which prepares the tenders, opens the tenders, and then Ministry of Economy, you sign the exploration license with them. So over the time from 2018, I didn't go further into past. In 2018, 2, then 3 in 2019, then this is issued in this year. Then in 2026, exploration license, then 3 again in 2021. In 2022, for some reason, we didn't sign any, right? And then spike suddenly to 14 in 2023. So far in 2024, there were only 2 licenses signed and issued to investors. But this spike in 2023 was a combination of a tender, which was issued in 2022, where five exploration licenses aimed at electricity generation were issued, and also a bunch of smaller ones which are intended for heat usage. So also, historically speaking, I'm listing here some companies which were involved in geothermal. As I mentioned earlier, INA Industria Nafta was for many years the only player doing oil and gas and limited, as we said, finding and thinking about geothermal. Then 2 companies were created by INA Industria Nafta, Geopodravina in northern Croatia for Project Lunjkovec Kutnjak, together with county, 2 counties there, Croatian Electrical Utility Company, and a largest, Podravka, the largest food production company there, who were thinking about utilization of heat, etc. And Terme Zagreb, which was 50-50 between INA and city of Zagreb for development of the geothermal field Zagreb. Both of those companies, as you can see, were closed later on. They didn't they didn't do much. They didn't do almost anything. But then when things relaxed, this is what happened. Okay? Bunch of smaller companies, some of them bigger, some of them smaller. International, domestic, designing companies, etc. All of them jumped into the opportunity, and now many let's say players are now playing in this field of geothermal. So also we've had some acquisitions over the last couple of years, which is also a sign of, let's say, I would say, a vibrant and developing market and developing business. ENA Geo, which is part of the local group, which does gas trading and also logistics, and they have a production of fruits and stuff like this. They acquired first Slatina 2, not Slatina 3, this is Slatina 2, from another license holder. Then they got Babina Greda 1, the smaller one in the north, from the same guy who sold them this area. Then they acquired a couple of months ago Babina Greda 2, which is just in the neighborhood, and they will probably down the line link these 2 into the same exploitation field. And iGeopen, the company where I work, acquired Ernestinovo license from another company which was license holder before. They did not do much there. They did not develop anything. So we jumped in and we did some work, and we're now essentially transferring this into the future exploitation field. So iGeopen, as I mentioned, 3 licenses. Ernestino, which I just talked about. Sieče is also in the east of Croatia in Osječko-baranjska county, with the capacity of 15 to 25 megawatts. Initial estimation again. In Ernestino, it's 10 megawatt maybe, with capacity to additional potential, maybe 5 to 10 megawatts, with the assumption of extending the area to the east, because we see that the structure, which is interesting for geothermal production, extends to the east. And we have Pčelić, which is quite interesting. It will be demanding. This is an area where we aim at minimum 20 to 30 megawatt electricity production. It has a very hot reservoir of above 200 degrees, maybe even, we expect maybe even above 210 degrees Celsius, but it's quite deep. So we'll have to drill wells deeper than 5,000 meters. It's going to be challenging, demanding. It's going to be probably expensive as well, but we are ready for the challenge there. And then finally, I would like to say that I'm happy to see that we experienced over the last 2 years, I would say, quite a significant change of perception of geothermal projects. You see yours truly here, I was in the morning program, which is seen by, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of Croatians around Croatia, speaking about preparation of the site for Ernestino 3 well testing, right? This is Mr. Krpan, head of Croatian Hydrocarbon Agency, in the primetime news program of Croatia. Martina Tušl, head of geothermal sector, and Tanja Durn, head of geological sector of Croatian Hydrocarbon Agency, in one of the major publications, news, paper and internet news in Croatia. Everybody now wants to learn something about geothermal. It's not a esoteric subject that it used to be some years ago. And finally, we are expecting more projects to come. I've shown here only 3. This is Ciglena by night, photograph done by Turboden in the operation, after we started it up. So far, the only geothermal power plant in Croatia, but as I would always like to say, the first of many. This is in Bošnjaci, the greenhouses where tomatoes are produced. They're working happily there as well. And these are the production and injection well of geothermal field Zagreb, where the heat is supplied, as I said, to local sports venue and kinesiologic college of the university and student dorms so far. So these are some 3 of examples of producing projects, which we completed and in production, and we really look forward to many more to come. And that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dragutin. That was a great, let's say, kind of walking us through the timeline and what's going on. A lot of interesting comments. I personally really like the fact that you said that geothermal was not esoteric anymore, that it has become a thing and people are looking a lot more into it. I also thought it was a bit humorous, the part when you talked about property owners. I don't know if you.
So you're from Serbia, it's very similar to what it's like there. It can be challenging.
If you've seen online that part where you visit the place where your whole family's fighting over a piece of land, and then you figure out it's a 5x5 empty place. But I think it's well, from the humor side of it, I think those are the kind of things that we need to work on, just to ease things, right? Legislation, making it easier to get these licenses, making it more open for investment, and hopefully that will happen with time. I would like to say that we still have a very, very good presence. I'd like to target some of the questions. So I'll go ahead and start. We have, let me see here. From Thomas Franzen, he said, you mentioned all geothermal heat gets converted to electricity. What is the efficiency factor, as ORC plants may only convert part of it?
It might have been a maybe I misspoke about, or maybe it was a misunderstanding. Of course, not all geothermal heat gets converted. The efficiency factor of an ORC power plant can be depending on the temperature, of course, on many factors, and how much steam you have, etc., can be between as low as 9 to 10%, up to 15, 17, maybe 18% in the best case scenario. So
Right.
yeah, you're absolutely right. ORC is not very, very highly efficient, but still, I mean, if you get good, let's say, conditions in the field, still, 20, 30 megawatt is nice. Especially, again, I keep emphasizing this because I see that this is one part that we're still lacking in communication about geothermal energy. People will get impressed by solar power plants of 20, 30, 50 megawatt installed power, but they don't understand that this is the peak power when the sun is shining directly down in the summertime, and this is it, in the nighttime, etc., etc. Then when you take account in all of this, then still a 10 megawatt power plant can produce over the year, throughout the year, much more energy than, let's say, 50 megawatt solar power plant.
Yeah, the base load segment of it is super important. Thank you for that. There's a question from Anik and says, how often does Croatian Hydrocarbon Agency organize geothermal licensing tenders?
Fair question. For smaller areas which are intended for direct heat usage, and shallower reservoirs, etc., they do it every now and then, couple of months. When there is an expression of interest, they will now compile the paperwork. It's not just click, and then you get the paperwork ready for opening the tender. So there is some preparation necessary to get all the special conditions from various administrative bodies around Croatia and state-owned companies, etc. But the big ones for electricity production, they will do every 2 to 3 years.
Gotcha. Thank you. There was a question that came in from Jack Emmon and kind of started a little bit of a discussion in the group. But so methane being a byproduct, quotes, how is this being managed by the current operational geothermal assets? How do you handle that byproduction?
Strictly speaking, we are now debating this between us and the geothermal operators and the administration, being predominantly Ministry of Economy and Croatian Hydrocarbon Agency. And this is the moment, maybe I should add, that we are very lucky, and they keep telling me that I'm overselling them, but I think we are really lucky that both in Ministry of Economy and in Croatian Hydrocarbon Agency, here in Croatia, we have people who used to work in business. So without denigrating people who have been working in state administration all their lives, there are great people, also on this side of the spectrum. But we are very lucky that people who come from industry and take over the administrative functions in ministries, etc., they understand what business is. They understand the pressure of time. They understand the pressure of money. So it's not like we have time to do everything. If if you need some quick response from them, they will provide it, and they understand really the intricacies of the business. So now to go back to the question, because we found out that there might be significant quantities of methane present there. What do we do with this? Hypothetically, if you would have, let's say, economically viable quantities of methane, you somehow should be able to harvest it, separate it, and then somehow sell it to the market. But the problem is that right now, as the law is defined and the legal definitions, you either have a license to produce geothermal energy, or you have a license to produce hydrocarbons. So strictly speaking, you shouldn't be able to do both. But we will be working on this to somehow relax these conditions so that you can do both. But if you don't have economically viable quantities of methane, what you need to do is reinject it back into the reservoir.
All right. But this co-production, if you have economical quantities of methane, could be a business model, right? That
Should,
could
yeah,
help
yeah,
the economics.
exactly, exactly. I mean, the hybrid project which I mentioned, I really have to look into the details of how it was administratively solved. But they essentially will be stripping methane, running gas motors, and then CO2 would be stripped from the vent, from the exhaust gas, and re-injected back into the reservoir to support support the pressure of the reservoir, and secondly, to avoid greenhouse gas emission.
Gotcha. All right, we move on. We got a question from Soraya. Hello, Dragutin. Are there any government subsidies to support the development of such projects in Croatia?
Yes, there is a system of government subsidies, not for the direct heat usage. For direct heat usage, you don't get a favorable price of the heat, but you can get quite sizable financial supports from EU funds, because EU funds are aimed at local heat utilization development, right? But when you think about utilization of EU funds for geothermal power plants for electricity generation, then they tell you no, this should be a private investment into your power plant. We will see how this will develop. Right now, we are fighting also with the authorities, because we have to develop the envelope for premium pricing for electricity for the next 10 or something years. This is something which is lagging a little bit, but we're working together on how to redefine the system. But yes, absolutely. Especially electricity production, drilling deep wells, constructing geothermal power plants. Right now, with reasonably low market price of electricity, again, it would not fly. Yeah, so you will have to have subsidies for this.
I think, well, the other point to add here is a couple of weeks ago when we were in Munich, we talked a lot about this. So subsidies are good to start off projects, but we really need to start finding economic models that make geothermal work in a way that you don't need subsidies in the near future, right? If we are to move it forward on a macro scale, let's say, going on more usage.
Yes,
You know what
I
I mean?
agree with you. And we have to see what the future of, when Russia invaded Ukraine, what was it, 2 years ago, we had skyrocketing electricity and generally energy price in Europe. And I'm amazed sometimes that when you start to talk to people and telling them, we would like to develop geothermal power plants, they are capex intensive at the very beginning, but then operation costs and longevity of production is negligible. So we need some help to overcome the initial capex spending. And they say, no, why would we do this? Energy is so cheap nowadays. Guys, you're forgetting what happens when there is not enough energy and when there is a special situation. We need to have also security of supply of the energy. As always, they say the most costly energy is the one which is not available at a particular moment, right?
That is a great one, but I'll just make one more comment before we move on. Is we're seeing the same trend even on the renewable lens, right? If you looked at the critical minerals, you still see some main places that are supplying it. And so, quotes, you're doing, not you, I mean, we generally as whatever community is doing the same mistake over and over. So how do you diversify energy? And how do you make the most of what you have? Like earlier, you mentioned co-production, right? Why not create a system that would make it possible to harness that? And this is where we need to let the governments know that they need to ease the processes if we really want to push what most of the governments are saying they want to happen. There's a bit of a disconnect there.
Exactly. I mean, people now started talking about nuclear again, right? So we will go nuclear, we will blah, blah, blah. Where is the nuclear fuel coming from? Do we have it locally? Do we have it? No. So you will be again, depending on the supply of nuclear fuel from somewhere else in the world. This is not your local domestic energy. Your local domestic energy is, if you have some oil and gas, like we do in Croatia, not as much as some other parts of the world, you have your wind, you have your solar, you have your biomass, you have your geothermal energy. That's it, buddy. Anything else, you depend on someone else. And again, people will say, oh yeah, we have the let's say globalized market of energy. It's not a big deal anymore. You can buy it from everywhere. Again, I remind everyone, what happened when the COVID crisis hit? We can laugh at it now, but right then, at that particular moment, there was a shortage of COVID vaccines around the world. Can you remember how all the national, even European Union, I mean, you have European Union, which is quite strong union and a connection between the countries, no borders, etc., etc. But even then, in that particular case, each EU member started buying vaccines on their own. So
we definitely have material for a panel discussion in the near future. I'm gonna move.
Let's move on with the questions.
Yeah. This is Dragutin. Are all the wells operating with pump, or some of them can naturally flow? How much kilowatt does the pump cost, and how is it compared to the well output power itself?
So I might have mentioned, or might have not mentioned, in the main geothermal, let's say, reservoir. You remember these carbon dolomitic limestones and dolomitic breccias, which I mentioned, which are usually at the depth between 3,000 and 5,000 meters. Usually in northern Croatia, along the Danube River, sorry, the Drava River, along the Hungarian border. These brines will contain might contain quite significant amounts of CO2 and even H2S and hydrocarbons, of course. But for example, in Ciglana, we did not need to lift or to produce or to pump anything. We would just open the valve and the well would start flowing. So this is something that we sort of expect in majority of the locations around around Pannonia, Croatia. But there will be some reservoirs which will be below hydrostatic pressure and will need pumping. Now, I cannot at this particular moment say how much does it cost. The issue with, I will not reply quantitatively and apologize for this, but I will reply qualitatively. The issue with pumps is that, especially if you have very high temperatures, is that the electromotors will fail and electronics will fail. And you have in ESPs all of these down in the well. Now, some companies resolve this by drilling wells with the wider casings, so that instead of producing through 9.58-inch casing, you will produce the 13.38-inch, which makes your well quite more costly to begin with. But then they can use line shaft pumps for pumping of the brine up. Then you have just mechanical part of the pump in the well, and this can run for 2-3 years without issues, because the electronics and the motor are on the surface, just and the shaft is running the mechanical part of the pump in the. So now, of course, going back to the operational cost of pumping, if the flow or the ratio of flow of the geothermal well and the temperature is low enough, then it might even be challenging to have, let's say, economical viability of installing a pump. Then the whole project is down the drain. But if you have very hot brine and you have quantities incoming into the wellbore, then yes. Gotcha. I again apologize for not knowing by heart how much the pumps cost.
All right, no problem. Let's move on. We have a question from Thomas. To mitigate some of the issues, scaling, presence of hydrocarbons, reservoir permeability, uncertainty, are closed loop technologies being considered?
Let's say, yeah, we are aware of this happening, but my usual answer to this question, in Croatia, there are so many low-hanging fruits right now that I don't really see application of closed loop technology running before all of the, let's say, again, low-hanging fruits are picked and eaten. So closed loop is still costly, if I understand correctly, compared to classical classical exploitation of geothermal reservoirs. So, you know, we even as we speak, even in the conventional sense, we have quite costly wells, and now even burden it further with closed loop applications. This is something that we would have to see whether it makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, that actually ties into another question that brought up. So, you know, EGS, the EGS concept, if, you know, there's any
Yes, yes,
potential
yeah.
for that. But conduction is an expensive way of harnessing heat. Obviously, there's going to be technology innovation that will allow that to do much better. So we'll see what the future holds. Someone asked if the slides will be available for reference. Yes, they will. And they will be sent out and the recording will be there. We'll move on to the next question. What minimum temperature for generating electricity that is economically valuable?
Hypothetically speaking, you can generate electricity even with 90 or 100 degrees Celsius, but then your efficiency will be very low. What I would say is that for you, anyway, one important thing to emphasize, in Croatia, we will have temperatures of geothermal reservoirs producing geothermal brine for electricity generation between 140 and 200 plus, right? So we will never be able to use direct steam usage, you know, flash systems. We will always go to organic Rankine cycle applications. Now, with using ORC, you can go even, you know, 100-ish degrees, but then your efficiency will be really low. It might make sense if you get good price, let's say, for this. If you already have all the wells, etc., then fair enough. But I would say that 140, 150-ish up for electricity generation using ORC.
Gotcha.
In an efficient manner, okay?
So this is a very specific question. What are the expected benefits of the Slatina geothermal projects, and what progress has been recently made on Slatina 2 and 3?
Licenses. Do you have these questions somewhere else? I'm trying to go through.
Yeah, it's
chat.
in the chat. So it's
Okay.
what's the expected benefits of the Slatina project?
Well, if by Slatina 2 and Slatina 3 you mean the license areas, Slatina 3 lost the license holder of Slatina 3 lost the exploration rights. They expired and they prepared the well site, but they didn't drill the well. So the license expired and will be re-tendered down the line to someone else. Slatina 2, I mentioned it. It's essentially paperwork-wise in the exploitation phase, and they are drilling one new well as we speak, and we'll be testing it. Down the, I think in a month or so. We're now in October, so in a month or so they will be testing the well in Slatina 2. Sorry, did I miss any part of this question?
No, that was exactly what was asked.
Both of these areas have temperatures 180 plus, 190 plus, and will be definitely targeting the electricity production.
Nice. So we have a couple more questions. Soraya says, this is a good question. Do you have enough local drillers and drilling expertise, maybe from oil and gas, to support the future development, or are you going to have to rely on others?
No, this is a fantastic question. Maybe I should have even mentioned it during my presentation. We do have this company, Croatia, where I was, heading for 3.5 years. They do have some resources, but it will not be enough. So we have some also license areas for exploration and production of hydrocarbons, and they will need some wells. And we have a bunch of all of these exploration and exploitation areas for geothermal, which will need many, many wells. So I will immediately say no locally, let's say, provided machinery and knowledge will not be enough. So we will have definitely to rely on importing some of the drilling rigs and drilling expertise from abroad. I mean, knowledge-wise and experience-wise, yes. Croatia, now as I said,
but you need the numbers.
In many years. Molim? Pardon me?
You need the numbers, right? You need more people.
It's yes, exactly. This is the matter of numbers, not of expertise. Local guys have had expertise, you know, drilling to 6,000 plus meters, overcoming lost fluids, overcoming high temperatures, etc. They've been living it for decades. But now
Yeah.
simply there is a matter of having enough drilling rigs to fulfill all these programs.
But you know what's the positive thing out of that message you just gave is that the energy world still needs a lot of professionals. And I think students that are out there listening to this, young professionals, should feel good about this. This is just another opportunity to keep, to stay in the energy world because we need more people at all times.
No,
So it's
absolutely,
positive.
absolutely, for sure. I mean, I've been preaching this for you know this already. We've known each other for quite a few years. I've been preaching about this for many years. That this is the natural transition of petroleum engineers, geologists, geophysicists, is even in case we move from oil and gas totally down the line, which is not going to happen because even for chemical industry reasons, uh, even if majority of workforce will not be needed for oil and gas anymore, it will be needed for geothermal for sure.
Nice. So we have a couple more questions and we'll slowly come to an end here. One comes
Mhm.
from Gerald Tischler. Said, can you briefly elaborate on how your reservoirs are completed? Are they
Mhm.
barefoot? What kind of completions some of these wells have?
Typical completion would be that you get to the top of the reservoir with 958-inch casing, which will then be your producing, essentially, you're producing without tubing. This is something that's very hard to overcome to people coming from oil and gas business into geothermal. You always think about tubing, and then you have to realize that there is no tubing because the really high volumes that you need to produce to generate enough heat transfer to produce electricity or to heat something directly do not allow for tubing. It's too much of a restriction. So you produce without a tubing. So you come with 958-inch casing to the top of the reservoir, enter into the pump, and then you drill 8.5-inch open hole, and we'll complete it by installing a slotted liner, so that because you don't have to worry. You also, this is something that it took me when I moved from oil and gas into geothermal. It took me 6-7 months to wrap my head around that there is no worries about fault lines, water coming into the reservoir, messing up your oil and gas production. You are producing water. So you drill into the fault lines to get the highest possible flow rates. You don't worry about saturation. You don't worry about zones being separated from each other. In some particular cases, if you would have a colder part of the reservoir, you would maybe like to squeeze this and then concentrate on the deeper part of the reservoir. But then you can do this also by choosing where to put your 958-inch shoe of your 958-inch casing. But then your productive part of the reservoir would be drilled, open hole, left open hole, and just completed by installing the slotted 7-inch liner to allow for the highest possible flow rate when you open the well. Or this is also the completion for injection wells.
Nice. Yeah, one of the biggest ones was, hey, why don't we have a 4.5-inch completion? What's going on? Why is all this 9.58, 7?
Yeah. Again,
But it's a mindset.
keep in mind
All right.
the average geothermal well needs to produce 300, 400, 500 tons per hour, or 500 cubic meters per hour.
Yeah.
Imagine a solid-sized family house. This is what you fill in every hour with water all the time. So there is no place for tubing.
Yeah. All right. Well, one more question. Can you shed some light on implementing the CO2 plume geothermal technology in Croatia?
This is something that's being considered in certain areas, but I'm talking to my colleagues about it who deal with this and try to simulate this and think about it. It's not clickety-click easy, So it is being considered. For example, in the Botskovci area, which is which is dedicated to future CO2 storage. It's also being considered whether CO2 plume, which would be created in this particular reservoir, could be directly used as geothermal working fluid, let's say. Yes, but it has some limitations, let's say.
It's interesting. I think there's quite some work being done at ETH and Zurich also on this.
Yes,
We
yes.
talked a little bit about it, so it's interesting to see what that future could look like. You know, basically a full circular process. Let's see when we need to get there. I think this would really be the questions for today. I'd like to thank you for your time and always your energy. I think this was a great session. I would also like to let the participants know that in 2 days we will have the session on the data set. So it's very important that you're there and you can ask your questions to understand what's the data set, what you need to do, what is this challenge about. It's a great opportunity. I don't even know which words to find. Is you get a chance to put your creativity in play, to talk with your peers, to come up with a solution, and you know, compete with other teams. So keep an eye out for your calendar blockers to be live on our sessions. So on Wednesday and Thursday, and then the week after we'll follow up with more boot camps. We hope you enjoyed this one. It was a very engaging Q&A. Dragutin, as always, thank you so much for supporting us, IGOPEN and Calida Aqua, and yourself.
Thank you,
A
guys.
really, really great talk.
Thank you
I
for
got
your
some
attention
personal
and for your questions. And before you finish, Gabriel, let me just say,
Yes.
you guys might have seen that I put my email addresses down here. So if you will think about some additional questions down the line later on, you know, don't worry, shoot me an email. I can reply directly to you.
That's very nice. Thank you so much, Dragutin. Thank you,
Pleasure.
everyone.